All right, I keep forgetting there's no intro music for these for this event. I was waiting for music to kick in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Milwaukee and Chicago user group. We are doing a quick live stream here for just going through some topics today. We'll kick it all off. Tommy, how you doing? Seth, how was your day of work?
Happy Tuesday!
Still happy Tuesday.
Twice in one day. How exciting is that?
This is like our favorite day when we get to see each other twice.
A little wider audience today.
Little punchy.
Bringing Chicago and Milwaukee back together again.
Sounds good. I like it.
Alex is in the house. Alex, while this is going on, you can triage my problems with hooking up backup and restore to the lake for my premium capacity. Because
thanks.
Little punchy because I'm still doing it manually. So I had a little 3 a.m. jaunt last night to get the models refreshed this morning.
Dig it.
Yeah. Excited to listen to you guys talk about thin reports.
Yes.
I got a few requests as well for Alex, just in case. So he's free.
Free tech support from Alec. That's amazing.
Welcome everybody to the combined joint user group.
Awesome.
Gonna have fun tonight.
So let's kick it over to Tommy. Tommy's got a couple slides to boot us off here, and then tonight's topic will be jumping into something I've been working on very recently or a lot. I mean, Seth and I, probably and Tommy, all work on this all the time. We have this concept of a thin report and a data model, and how do you manage those, and what can you do, and how does that work inside the service? How does that work in desktop? So what we're going to do tonight, it's going to be just kind of all demoing. It's going to be kind of off the cuff. I've prepared a little bit, but not a ton. So I'm going to see how well I do and if this is going to work or not. So we'll just wing it. So Tommy, over to, let's get the right one. I think I got the right one here. Yeah, this looks like the right screen. Tommy, over to you.
So it's always good to have another Chicago and Milwaukee user group meeting.
Hey, wait a minute. This slide is wrong. It says Chicago RBI user group.
I am waiting for
Here you are again, Tommy.
Just cutting us out again.
Stomp on the Milwaukee pug.
Here's the thing. You send me a file that's not Adobe XD, and I will put it in a PowerPoint. So
fair.
Last time, I'm like, hey, can I have a logo? Yeah, just download Adobe XD, grab this little file, but you have to get all the objects in it, and it should work. It's easy. So next time PNG file, we'll have this joint.
Sufficient.
So Chicago and Milwaukee Power BI user group. If you're on mute, too bad. It's why would you be on mute? I guess. But we're really excited for today. Just kind of jumping in for the agenda for those who are uninitiated. A few things. We're going to do some Power BI updates real quick, real fast. Just if you've missed everything that's happened in the last 30 days, we've literally just are on the cusp of August for another user group, literally on the last 6 hours of August. And then we're going to go, Mike's going to jump right into the demo. He's going to kind of, run with it. Amazing content here. We'll have a quick discussion, and we're going to really rely on you guys too for Q&A. Because this is a topic too, as Mike said, if you don't do this or haven't thought about how this can work in your process or your workflow, this is something you should start thinking about in September. Don't wait for August. Wait, as soon as we hit September, this should be something that should be part of your discussion on how can you implement this and integrate this. And then we'll do our Q&A. We'll do the Stump the MVPs. Any questions that you have, we'll jump on Teams and we'll do the networking. So few quick things. A lot of some major updates now that have happened actually with the Milwaukee, or not with Milwaukee, but I'm sure maybe there's some Microsoft development in Milwaukee, but in Seattle, the Microsoft development here. So the Power BI desktop updates, a few kind of fun things. I'll just kind of highlight it. The blog I will send in the chat, but some of the major things is they've done a lot more with the formatting. So buttons have become more and more common. Or shapes have become more and more common. So you can actually really customize the shapes to your heart's delight now. Rounded edges, a lot more customization there. And also for those who've talked about Q&As before, another really great idea where you can actually share Q&A sentiments. Can't really say that word. We'll worry about that later. But the ability to share your Q&A in a data model and actually really get more of input from users on what Q&A they're using in your reports. A few things with DAX on just kind of looking at date time values. Some of the other major things, they've been really working on goals. We haven't seen goals updates really since MBAS. And now goals are available on your phone. I've actually checked this out. It looks really cool. And it's like, oh, this is what an executive would look like, or what would want to look at. So goals are doing some really neat things, and I think that we're going to start seeing some major goal updates. Um, Premium Gen 2 is in preview. Automatic aggregations just dropped. That's in preview as well. So again, that's I think another user group meeting for another day. The scanner API is now generally available, and the on-prem gateway. So a lot of major updates. All of this is available on the Power BI blog. So if you've not seen any of this, jump on the Power BI blog, check it out. Really cool information there. So the last thing, in case you've not heard, unfortunately, I think everyone who's on this user group meeting tonight is our listeners, our faithful listeners. But one thing we're really excited about that Power BI Tips has launched in the last few months is a podcast. And just a real quick thing on the podcast, our user groups are always focused on hows. Usually it's kind of like, how do you do this? Like, for example, how do you do a data model and thin reports? How do you do aggregations? How do you do incremental refresh? And most content in our community is around the how. This podcast is diverged from a lot of the content and training out there, and it's really about the why. And it's about, all these things you can do in Power BI, but what's the purpose? What's the point? And that's the discussions that we have. So it's really, today we talked, for example, we talk every Tuesday and Thursday. Today was about filters on the slicer pane, or the filter pane, or actually using slicers. And it wasn't about why you should, or where you should use them, or what's the purpose, but it was like, why do you use them? What do users actually look at? And what's the implications? So again, it's taking the Power BI water cooler, all the discussions you have offline, and putting that to a forum. So we're really excited about that. You can join on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. With that, a lot of information there. Wanted to run through that because I want to go to the main event, and that's going to be Mike Carlo.
Trying not to screw up a demo. See how this goes. Anything, Seth, you want to run in there? Any kind of notes, comments, things you thought were cool that you want to throw in before we jump into the demo piece?
I think Tommy did a comprehensive coverage of the
I'll take that.
30 days. There were some things in there, like Microsoft being named the leader.
That's
augmented.
That's
BI
a big win.
platforms,
Well, that goes without saying.
Well,
they've been gaining
didn't say
speed.
it though.
Besides that, there's actually a publication saying it, but
yeah. So big win there. Congrats, Microsoft, on another Gartner crushing award, just stomping on competitors left and right. It's amazing to see. Love to be part of that the crew, right?
You know what?
That's all I got.
You can be a fair weather fan, but like when your team's winning, if when your team's winning, it's good to feel like you're winning on the right team.
We jumped on the bandwagon, when we triple A's, man. We followed this team all the way up through the major. We just hitched on to the right team.
Exactly.
We're straight going to the
it's a dynasty right now.
The play football, kick a ball in the net over the goal.
Score a goal unit.
Hit a home. Kick a home run.
Yeah, kick a home run. That's it. That's all those things.
Sports balls. Yes. Go.
Sports balls. Clearly, that separation between IT and the athleticism is still strong and live.
No, it's not. Hey, soccer.
Kickball.
Old school soccer player.
I love soccer.
Still elementary school 3-point champion right here. 36 threes in 8th grade, man.
Dang.
Don't mess around.
That's okay.
Homie, don't play.
I'll look at I'll go to junior high, look at the record books.
Excellent. So with that, let's see if I can get my screen share working here. So I'm going to try and jump over to this one. And yep, looks like that's working. And there's my desktop. So let's, I'm going to quickly jump into just a couple quick slides. I want to talk at a high level what we're going to accomplish today. So I'll have Seth and Tommy just kind of monitor the chat in YouTube and or LinkedIn. I think they're both going. So I'm just going to assume that they're working. Okay. And then I'll just jump into this and they'll pause me and catch me with any kind of comments, things that are questions in part of this process. So Tommy and Seth, feel free to jump in anytime if there are any questions that are relevant to what I'm talking about, nothing about sports teams or sports balls as we go. All right, let's rock and roll. Shift F5. Hopefully I can get this on my screen. All right. Oh, that's the end of the slide. Let's not do that one. Let's do the first slide. This looks better. Okay. topic tonight is data models and thin reports. So we're just going to define what this is and what this means for your implication. So we just recently talked in the podcast kind of really around this concept of data models and thin reports. And there's a lot going on there. When you start talking about there's a user-based report and users are making reports, and then at some point in time, you're going to move that report away from users and start governing them. It's like a governed data set. It's kind of a bit more of a regular production item, right? So this is, as we move away from these user-based data sets, we want to think about a pattern here that we've been using heavily in Seth and my, and I think Tommy, your development too, in your environment as well. You do thin reports as well. This concept of you build a Power BI file that is just a data model, and then you connect other reports to that data model, and then those reports are called the thin reports. There's no data model in them by themselves. You basically live connect yourself directly into a PowerBI.com model, and then consume data directly from there. So that's the concepts that we're talking about here. So if I move on to the next slide, hopefully. Come on, PowerPoint. Okay. So here's typically when I see new users starting the Power BI journey. This is typically where they're starting. They're typically starting in this environment where they have a report builder. I build a data model. I load my data, and I make multiple models, and then I take that single model and I deploy it directly to PowerBI.com. So this is me making my 3 reports. Each model gets its own data model, and the downside of this a little bit is you can have repeated data tables or data transformations or measures or calculations that are repeated across multiple reports. The downside of that is when you do that, you now have, if you make a change to one of the 3 reports by updating a measure, you now have to go through each of the 3 reports and update each individual item. This also adds a lot of weight to your PowerBI.com environment because each model that you're deploying with a report requires, you're loading the data essentially multiple times. So if I have a customer database table and I load that customer table 3 times, well, I've just replicated that information 3 different times for each of the 3 reports, and that's a bit wasteful. So this is again our common pattern, and this is what I would call, and we talked about this in the podcast, this would be like a user-defined report. My data sources might be Excel. Maybe I'm lucky enough to get access to a SQL server, and I've got a couple tables pulling from there. I may be doing what Tommy does and pulling a bunch of information from SharePoint because Tommy loves SharePoint, and this is maybe how my data sources are built. But as we start growing up the data model and it becomes more important to the business, we want to start thinking about better, more sustainable methods to deploy these reports from a user into a bigger organization, grow this model up. So if I can make my slide go, next slide. In this area, we're talking about the model and a thin report. And I drew a couple more arrows on here because it's a bit more relevant to what we're building. So in this area, we have potentially 2 people that can be involved. Now, it doesn't have to be a different person. I made them different colors just to illustrate there might be 2 people involved here. But this may be a person who's an expert at doing the data model, making tables, making measures, creating the relationships between all that data. And this data model is probably a bit more robust. You put some requirements around it. This is likely a certified data set. This is likely a data model that has peer reviewing with it. This is probably a data model that has incremental refresh, aggregation tables, calculation groups. It's a bit more complex because the data modeler, gentleman or gal, is the person who's doing that heavy data modeling for us and making this rich data set that I can connect to. Now I could connect to it with Excel or other things, but for our argument's sake here, we're going to talk primarily in Power BI. So the data model can be deployed directly to PowerBI.com as just that. It's still a Power BI report, but it's just a data model. There's no visuals, or if there are visuals in it, it's like simple. A couple, graphics or a table here or there to spot check some data, maybe a last refresh date on there. That's it. And then the report builder, what he does is he connects to that data model, a live connection to the data model inside the PowerBI.com service, and they build their report on top of it. So you can add additional measures, you can make new report pages, but the data model remains consistent. And then when I publish that report, and this is why the arrow here in the middle, that's why this arrow is in the gray area, because it's kind of like a loose connection. Like it's connected to it, but ultimately when you publish the thin report, which we're calling this element over here, this would be our thin report. As we publish the thin report directly over to the service, our report gets loaded here, but now the data model connection comes directly from the data model. So everything lives inside the service. The data model and the live connection to that data model all happens inside the service. So it just kind of works. So this is really what we're talking about. We're going to talk about how to build this kind of architecture where we're going to build a report. We're going to stick a data model in it. We're going to publish said report to the service, and then we'll kind of tear that apart and figure out how we rip that thing into two parts. And so now we have a data model and a Power BI report such that you can now have two elements. So yeah, this is kind of the core of what we're going through. And so with that, we'll move on to the demo. And
so while you transition there, Mike,
yeah,
when do you recommend using this approach? Is it all the time, some of the time?
great question. So I think it would to depend on, in my opinion here, again, let me transition to screens here so we can all see what's going on. We'll go to this one or this one. Don't know why my desktop doesn't show, but whatever. I thought I had a desktop on there. All right, we'll go to this camera. Let's talk the three of us. Okay. So when would this make the most sense? I think this is a scenario where we want to look at what is the team size, or who are the individuals that are on your team, and are you going to want to make model changes independently of report changes? Use cases where this makes sense. This makes sense when you have an incremental refresh policy turned on the table, right? I want to be able to go in with SSMS. I want to refresh partitions one at a time, or I have a larger amount of data. And, if I'm working in a Power BI file, if I loaded, for example, let's say you have a lot of data model is really large. I've got a data model that's on my desktop at 12 gigs in size. I don't want to be working on a 12 gig file, Power BI file on my desktop, and I don't want to be publishing that to the service all the time. It's very slow. So what I would rather do is I'd rather publish the metadata about the model and then publish that information to the service. So your model size gets really large. You're doing things like incremental refresh, where you've already refreshed a bunch of partitions. So if I have a PBIX file that I've developed a data model in, and I want to publish those changes to the service, if I have incremental refresh turned on, it will delete all your partitions and make you start over, and it will start refreshing all those partitions again. In certain cases, if you've already spent the money to make all those partitions loaded, you don't want to do that. You don't want to refresh your data model and reload all those partitions. So we'll use a tool like ALM Toolkit to help us publish the changes of our data model directly into Power BI.com, the service. That will then allow us to skip the partition creation and update measures and things that don't require a full table load. Seth, Tommy, are there any other things that I missed that you would put as considerations for why you want to go this method versus just build everything in one report?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd add is, the outline of what you've gave is predominantly where our use case is.
Yes.
But I would almost argue it makes a lot of sense to do this even in smaller realms where it's like 10, 15 minutes to publish a model, because think of how many little tweaks that you make when you're updating reports. Like you get it out there, you publish it, and the end user comes back 5 minutes later and they're like, "Oh, can you do that?" When you have a thin report, it's just instantaneous. Like you're just publishing those visual changes all the time.
Yep.
And all that little tweaking is just, you're saving so much time and headache going back and like catalog. Well, hold on, I'm not going to publish until I have like 20 changes geared up. And in this way, there's a lot of flexibility with those thin reports being decoupled.
Yep.
In that these little changes all the time, I think, far outweigh, some of the, not challenges, but just different ways we interact with that model as a separate entity.
Yeah, and I'll even argue, regardless of the size of the data model, like even if you have a very simple data model, the ability to build other reports off of this for other use cases rather than
scale.
reinventing the wheel, like from usually a lot of reports that are being asked, when you kind of break it down, could take a normal data model or your gold data model. Say you had the marketing data model.
Yeah.
You could build multiple reports off that, where you don't have to worry about, okay, do I have the relationships correct? Do I have the right DAX measures correct? you already have those DAX measures there. There's obviously some limitations, but I say maybe 80% of the time, you don't need to go back to the source file to add anything.
Correct.
And especially now too, with composite models and what else you can do and add other data sources, the flexibility and the functionality that you are given on a live connected data set or connected to a data set
Mhm.
really provides an author with some great functionality that also gives the person who's created that data model one source of truth, which cannot be understated.
Awesome. Great feedback there as well. Yeah, and I would say, when am I using like a report and model all merged together? I mean, right now what I'm doing is everything I do, if it's a quick demo or a prototype, or I'm trying to get someone trying to get a report in front of someone, that's kind of where I'm using that technique. Any other place that I'm doing this, I'm thinking more about architectural decisions. And this is where I think our moniker that we run really well at Power BI Tips is act like the business. So we got to move fast, but then think like IT makes a lot of sense for us, because in this case, we want to have a thin report is good for long-term sustainability. It's good from a speed standpoint. It's nice to have a data model that's separate, so I can iterate, design, rebuild the model independently of breaking the report. And so I really like this pattern, and I'm using this more and more almost all the time now, with the exception of, prototyping, getting a quick demo together, doing a simple little thing. I'm not worried about splitting files apart and building a larger architecture like that. Another one point that I'll point out here is an interesting article came out from Chris Webb that talked about if your thin report has too many measures, that could also be a detriment to your performance as well. So there is some performance degradation, and he was doing testing at like the hundreds and thousands of measures, like hundreds of measures inside a thin report, and how that was slightly slowing down your report. Not that it's gonna be, I wouldn't not choose this design pattern based on his article, but it was just a good consideration that when you get into a lot of measures, you really do want to be critical around where these measures are living, and you might want to have a plan or a process. And we're Tommy, I, and Seth are all around figure out what your process is. How do you design the process so you can have thin reports, have measures in them, and figure out a plan to migrate those measures into the main report. Great comments. Okay. Any other feedback, questions off of the channels? Looks like you guys are handling all the connections just fine, or the questions on the social medias just fine.
We can do it.
We can do it. Okay. Excellent. So I'm going to move on then. So did Power BI work? Well, yes. Well, actually, no. So we're going to get into the demo. Hopefully my demo will hold up for me. I always do the demo. So let me get out of the PowerPoint slide here. All right, so I'm going to start literally from scratch. I'm a big proponent of do nothing that's pre-built. I have some pre-built things in case things just go sorely wrong with me and how I built this thing, but we're going to start from scratch. And then I'm just going to start narrating. All right, Tommy and Seth, slow me down if I'm getting too quick here, and then I can pause and take questions as well. First and foremost, this is desktop. I'm just going to start with a brand spanking new, fresh desktop. My favorite thing right now is this try a sample data set. I love this button at this point. Whenever I'm doing demos, I'm using this all the time. So I'm going to click on try a sample data set. I'm going to click on load sample data. We're going to jump on over here to Power Query, hit financials, and then we're going to load the information. I don't really care. I'm just going to let it load. And then I have my auto date time calendar turned off. So if you'll look over here on the right-hand side, you'll notice that my date calendar, my date is no longer an actual date. It doesn't have the calendar next to it. So I've got to build a date calendar that would be on top of this. So I will build on the home ribbon. Actually, I'm going to go to the modeling ribbon and say new table. And this will be my calendar. And then I'm going to use the calendar auto function. And then I'm going to zoom this in, hopefully a little bit to make it bigger so everyone can see what I'm writing. Calendar equals calendar auto, hit enter, and that should then generate a calendar. So this is going to give me at least 2 data tables inside my data model. Let's go look at the relationships. Another kind of some best practices as I'm in here. We'll link the date column to the date column. Again, not very fancy. I'm a big proponent of this new table mode that they have for the modern model view. And so I like pinning, so one of the feature sets that I really like right now recently is pinning the related fields to the top of the card. Love this feature. Turn that on, and that will do is it'll take the date columns, the ones that are related together, it'll automatically move them to the top of the tables in both areas. So that I love that feature. And then also another feature that I've been using a lot of recently is right click, collapse all. I don't need all the fields in there. You can close all the tables down to something. Tommy just learned something new. I see his face. Tommy's going home. He's done. He clicks every single button on the bottom of every single table to shut them all down. I can see it already. He's dying laughing. I can see it already. Anyways, so close all is awesome because now if you have many different tables, you'll build those. And also one more other thing I'm pointing out now. I typically have all the dimension tables on the left or right hand sides, and then I put all my dimension tables, the ones that are the fact tables, and I'll just expand this so it's a little bit longer. They're typically in the middle of my report. So all the dimensions on the sides filter down into the main table. And the reason I do this is because this gives you a very clean, all your relationships will have a 90-degree angle in them, and it'll be very easy for you to see where the one and where the many relationships live. And if by chance you enter in some data, and let's say you have a disassociated table, I'm just going to make an arbitrary table here. So this is a disassociated table. Like this. So it's a dimension table. It's helping you with a visual or some kind of property there. I'm just going to hit load again. And when I make this new disassociated table, you'll notice that there are no relationships attached to it. And so what I'm finding again is another really good pattern here. Hopefully. Apparently the model view did not update, or I just crashed desktop. Okay, there it goes. So now I have this disassociated table and I want to pull it to the top. So I then will again go here, collapse all. And so now I have any of my tables that have no relationships, I'll put across the top of the model, and then any of my fact tables will go here, and then all my dimension tables go on the left-hand side. So it makes a really clean layout and very easy to read. And I'm thinking about this too for my next consumer. So when Seth picks up this file, he's like, what the heck did Mike do? He can at least kind of have a common pattern on how he goes through this data model and looks at things. So all that said and done, we're good to go. I'm doing some prototype and testing here. So we're going to just zip right over here real quick. I'm going to grab the date calendar, and then I'm going to go to my financials table. And because I have the date column twice, I don't need it in the second table, so I'm going to hide it because I'm going to try and build a good data model, proper design. Drop sales numbers on here. We're going to make this a line chart like so. And then we need some sort of category or category grouping on top of our data report. So I'm going to copy this, copy that, and can paste it again. And so now I've got another table, and this table I'll just drop in. I'm going to switch out the date column, and we're going to put product in there, and then remove that, and then we're going to change it over to a bar chart. So now I've got kind of two visuals on a page. So we've built the report, great, fine. Now I'm going to save it, Control-S, go to my desktop here, and just save it as, full file. Save that guy. Okay, everything's in here. So this is everything you're used to. This is what we did earlier. You can just publish this right into the service. So let's say you've done this. Let's say you've got to this point and you need to pull this report apart. So I want 2 Power BI files instead of this 1 file. So if I go back over to my Power BI tips. So at Power BI tips, Steve Campbell, which is a great, another Microsoft MVP, wrote an article around how do you take a Power BI file and with PowerShell, split the file into the model and into a report. So now we can kind of break it into 2 pieces together. Yeah, I'm gonna drop one more link in there, Seth. It's the other one actually. Also, there's another. Shoot. I know you did good. That is the hot swap connections. We're gonna use that one next. That's the next link I'm gonna use. So this report here. So this is actually doing the splitting. And so to get the code to do this, at the bottom of the article there is a script. Warning, this is not supported by Microsoft, but if you want to use it, I've had good success with it and it works multiple times. So I haven't broken anything yet, but doesn't mean it won't break in the future. So just warning, caution, whatever the heck you want to talk about that one is. So I'm taking this script out, Control A, you'd copy that script out of the bottom of the page or the article, and then you'll go over to a PowerShell. And actually, I really, really like the ISE version of PowerShell because I like writing code because I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. So we go into this PowerShell thing, and then what we'll do is we'll copy all the code into here. I have already copied this code down, so I will just copy it in here with this. So this is this PowerShell script that we're going to run. And let me close out of the Power BI file because it will be angry at me if I have this open. So I'm going to save it, close the Power BI file. Okay, we're out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this report we have right now is what we have. This report file now, this is our combined file. It has the data model and the report all smushed together. Now we're going to use this PowerShell script, and what it's going to do, it's going to take a copy of the file, it's going to rip out the data connection, and it's going to make a new file with no data connection. It's going to basically copy out the data connection, make a brand new file, and put it in there. So this gets rid of any of the visuals you have inside the report. All right, so we're gonna run this script, and when I run it, it's going to ask me to select the file that I want. So I'm going to select the full file here, and when I select this file, hopefully, I hit open, and when it does it, it will make 2 new files on my desktop. So, and then I'm going to actually refresh the screen one more time here because it actually did it too fast. So I'm going to F5 it one more time. So what this has done, it's made 2 new files, and then you'll see now the name of these files. One says model, full file model, and then one says report. So it basically took that single file that I had earlier, the full file, and now it's broken into 2 pieces. So we're going to open these up and then see what happened to the files, because now this is our 2 parts to our problem, right? We have one for the data model and one for report visuals. So let's go into the full model first. Let's see what that looks like. We go in here. What's Alex Dupler saying? Is he getting me in trouble again? Alex is probably always getting me in trouble. Okay, so over here on the right-hand side, we have our field window, and there we go. Our data model's here, but the visuals I built on the page are no longer there. It's just a blank report. This is just a data model. So I'm going to style this a little bit because I actually prefer a method on how I stylize this report. And so my preference here is I'm going to actually go to actual size. I'm going to minimize these things. So I have the report canvas. I'm going to minimize the fields, and I just, again, this is how I do it. You can do it however you want. I like going to the home ribbon. I like adding a text box, and then I say model only this model only report, and then I'll add I'll add a little note here, as intended. Right, so we want to let people know like this was this is intentional. We want to make sure that this is don't worry about it. This is okay. We can do this. This is why we built the report. We'll do that like this. We'll make this big. We'll put it in here. Another thing that I'll also add in here, and in just a moment, we'll do that in a second. We don't have incremental refresh on this report when we do data refreshes, but if you have incremental refresh, it's definitely a very wise option to say contains incremental refresh. Now, the reason you note this is because what I talked about earlier is if you do an incremental refresh and you have a model that has it in there, if you publish this report with incremental refresh turned on, it will delete all your old partitions and start trying to reload them new. On small data sets, this is not a problem. On large data sets, this is a major problem, and you will wipe out your data for hours at a time. Seth's smirking because he knows it's happened.
Which is why contains incremental refresh is typically followed with do not publish this at all.
Touch it and die.
In bold, in red, and it terrifies anybody who doesn't know what they're doing.
Yes, exactly. And then because I'm a style kind of guy and I like style, we're going to just drop a page background here. So we're going to go page background. I'm just going to make a quick little shade here for gray. And then I love drop shadows because, yeah, why not? It's a feature of Power BI. We'll just drop that in there, and we'll just drop a quick drop shadow like that. Okay, so it looks like it's going to pop out. It feels good. This is how I basically run the report. I'm done. There's nothing else in here that I need to do. If I need to do testing, I'll rename the page model down here on the bottom side, and then I'll make any other initial tabs, any data things, tables, other things I want to do that test the data or the quality of the data. I will make additional tabs for those, and those will be tabs where I do this. If you want to get really fancy about it, you can add a visual on this page that says last refresh date. So if someone's just wandering around, they'll know when this report was last refreshed, or whatever you want. You can do kind of little statisticky things on this page if you think that makes sense for you. Okay. That's the model. So I'm going to minimize this, and now we're going to go back over. I'm going to get rid of my PowerShell stuff because we're already done with that. Don't worry, you don't have to write the code. You just got to use it. And now we're going to go to the report side. Now the thin report is broken. I'm going to let you know right now. The connection has been stripped. There is no data in it. And I'm going to show you how, and we fix that. And then how do we do this when we publish local development? And how do we do this in the service? So I'm going to double click the full report here. Dang, it's 6:41 already. I got time. I can finish this in 20 minutes. That's not a no thing. So this will bring up my thin report now, and we will see. You'll be surprised. I mean, this will happen a lot. You just be comfortable with it. It breaks. Everything's broken. It's trashed because there is no data in this. There's no data model. Everything over here is gone. So what we have to do now is we have to connect this with a live connection to something, to connect it to something that we have here. So you can connect to a Power BI data set. So that would mean we'd have to publish the model first to the service and then connect to it. Or we can connect this thing locally to our local data model. So when I have, so because Power BI is awesome, and we have the desktop runs a version of analysis services all on the report. Someone's saying something about mute. Can you guys still hear me? I don't know if someone said that.
I can hear you.
Okay, that's all that matters then, Seth. So now that we have this report here, now we can go in here. We can connect. Okay, so thank you, Fernando. You said you were on mute, not me. Got it. Okay, never mind. Sorry, I was reading comments when I shouldn't have been. That was my fault. We're gonna go in here now, and we're gonna connect to some data. So now we're gonna go to data, and then we're gonna go to analysis services, and it's gonna ask me for some sort of server, and we can actually type in localhost here and connect to my other data model. So I actually have two Power BI reports open at the same time, and I'm gonna hopefully click on the right thing here. So here's my data model. This is my data model report here, and I have a secondary report model that's open, and I need to get the connection string to this other data model. So to do that, I go to my external tools. And my personal preference, I just jump into Tabular Editor 3, which I love, by the way. And assuming that I did everything correctly here, Tabular Editor 3 will just spin up. And this will give me the local host connection down here in the very, it's a new version, I got to update. Down here at the very bottom, you'll see there's my local host, 61058. So that's the number, or that's the number that I have to use. I think I can I click on it? I guess I can. So I'll take that one, and I'll go over here, and the same one on this one, I'll go to local host, and then I'll do a semicolon, and I'll do 61058, just like that. I don't need to enter the database. I prefer not to, and I'll leave it as a live connection. I'll click OK, and this will say, hey, you're going to authenticate, and I'm going to use my Windows account. I think that should be fine. And there we go. I've got my permissions, and there's my data model. So it makes this, in the local data models, the data model is this really weird, nasty GUID looking thing because it spins this up locally on your machine. So this is something that just kind of lives around on your local machine. So it doesn't really matter. We just got to connect to that. Click OK. And bada bing, bada boom, our data model has repopulated, and now I get all my tables, and everything shows up. So Power BI is once again happy. My visuals are there. So now I have a thin report. This report does not contain any measures in it, but I can make measures if I want. So let's go full tilt on this thing. And what we will do now is let's go. So I have Tabular Editor. This Tabular Editor is now connected to my local data model in my other Power BI file. So as bonus content, we will go through here now, and I'll go back to my Power BI data model. I'm going to open up the fields well, and I love this feature. So does Alex Powers, and he would adhere to this as well. There's a couple fields in here that are numeric based: sales, cost of goods, discounts, total sales, manufacturing price. Might not be one we want to do a min, or we might do a min and max on that one, but we won't do that one. Month number does not make sense to aggregate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take month number and make it a, actually we probably do that up here in the data set actually. So we go to modeling. We want to change the data type of some of these columns. So let's go over here to the modeling area. Click on a column. Oh, there's column tools. Okay, so this one we don't want to summarize this one. So we're going to say the default summarization, do not summarize. And the same thing for year. Does not make sense to do an addition on top of a year. So I'm going to make those do not summarize. And now we've got a cleaner data model, but now I need measures, and I need to hide all these other columns. So this is where the power of Tabular Editor comes in. And we'll probably have to do a session on this at some point, but I have this ability to make scripts or macros that run specific procedures over and over again. So if I double click the script on the 0, this is a macro that comes from, it's basically a C# script that you can run. And what it does is I can select every column that has a numerical value. And then from those columns, I can then automatically make a measure that sums them. And from that sum, hide the existing column. So let's go through this. We need the sales column, COGS. We need discounts. We need gross sales. We need manufacturing price, profit, sales price, and units sold. Now I can run this macro, boom. And what this does is it goes through each of those columns, makes them all a sum of something, and then hides them. Now I've made changes to the data model, so I just made about 8 measures or so. I'm going to hit save on the data model, so Control S. Yep. It's going to say you're going to make changes, and you'll now see that my data model automatically gets all those measures created and automatically hides the existing columns. The only one I want to modify here slightly is the one around, I think it's sale price. Not sure sum of sale price makes sense. So instead of that being sum of sale price, I'm just going to change this to max of sales price and then change the function from a sum to a max. So that's the only one I think that doesn't make sense here. I don't have an automatic function that does max of things, but you can modify that script and it'll just do that for you. So I'm done with Tabular Editor right now. I'm going to close him out, get rid of that. And now I've got a whole bunch of measures here that are doing max of sale price and some sum of sale price. Another thing I should have done while I was in Tabular Editor was make a folder and put all these measures in there for good model design, but we'll skip that for now. Okay, we're done. We have a model and now we have a report. So now we got to figure out how to publish this. We can do local development all day long, and you'll see here the two models have a different version of the data model. The one I just changed here with Tabular Editor has a bunch of measures in it. The one I'm looking at now in my report, my thin report, doesn't have those measures. So I have to refresh this data model before the changes come over. The visuals did not break, but now I'm using the wrong columns. So instead of sales, I should probably be using sum of sales instead. So I will add that instead, and I'll get rid of the sales column. And this one over here, I'm also using the product column and the sales column. So I'll also migrate this over to the sum of sales as well and remove my sales column. So now I've adapted my measures for my report. If I want to make any other kind of measures, so if I want to do something dividing or other kind of calculations, we can make those inside this report. So if I right click and say new measure, we can say, I guess it would be what? Gross sales minus cost of goods would be something you'd maybe want to look at. So we can just do, maybe what, total revenue? I don't know what that is. I'm spitballing here. So that would be gross sales. So let's do sum of gross sales. And then we'll subtract from that our cost of goods, sum of COGS. So that you can make a measure, and so now we have another total revenue one that's inside here that we have another measure, and then we can drop that into our page. And now this measure is in the thin report, but not in the model. And you know, because I want to be careful about this, let's do proper model design. Just because I want to set up good practices here. I'm gonna go back to the external tools. I'm gonna open the Tabular Editor, and you'll see in this data model, the financials, we have all these measures, but in the thin report, I see total revenue, but I don't know which measure lives in which environment. I don't know what's a thin report and which one's a part of the actual data model. So I need to move everything here into a place where I can recognize this comes from the model. So this is why I recommend doing this, is we'll go back to the model here, and then we'll go back into our financials table, and all of these measures that are in a part of that original table, I'm going to grab them all, and I think I can just drop them into a table, display folder, and I'm going to call this model. And actually, I'm going to call it underscore model, because if I do the underscore, it will move that folder automatically to the top of the list. Hit enter on that. We've now got a folder for all those measures. Easy peasy. Oh man, I feel like I was gonna go into like a clicky draggy droppy there for a moment, but I didn't quite get there yet. So I'll hit save on this one. This will then force my data model to update, and now I have a single folder for the model. So these are all the measures that are coming from the model and not from other dimensions. So this is, to me, this is really good practice, right? If you're going to build stuff in the model, make sure you make a folder for them and call them out as they're coming from the model. That way, every other measure you're looking at in the report, you know where it came from. So let me go back over to our thin report, hit save here. Hopefully nothing breaks. Let me refresh the data set here, and bada bing, bada boom. We've got our new model folder and all of our measures are there. And now we have our total revenue, which is now in a separate area. And the downside of this is there's no modeling ribbon here. I have no way of making this total revenue fit into a folder. So kind of the downside of doing part of this technique here, but at least now I have a delineation between these are measures that are coming from the model and this is coming from the report. This is super helpful and will help you track things a lot better here. Okay, so that's it for our data model. We've got this all done. Now what I'm going to do is let's go publish this to the service and let's show you how to rebuild this thin report such that it can then touch the live connection in the service. So this is where we have another tool that Steve Campbell built for us. It's called the hot swap connections. And this is where we can, again, strip out the connection in the thin report and repoint it to something in the service. So the first thing I got to do is to publish our report directly into the service. So I'm going to switch out my account here. Let's sign out of these things. And I'm going to sign in with my mic at powerbi.tips so it will work correctly. So let me sign in here, hopefully. And then that is done. And with that, we'll be able to go here. Let's sign into that. And then we'll do the same thing for this other browser window here. I'll just sign in so it's correct. Sign that in as well. All right, and sign in as well. All right, so we're signed in. Everything looks good. We're going to publish the model. So let's get this in the service. So I'm going to hit publish. Yeah, let's save it. Might as well. And so I'm going to I think I'm going to put it in my Power BI embedded space. Let me just double check my service here real quick to make sure I got the right services. I'm going to zip over to, not that one. That's the wrong environment. Where is my browser window for powerbi.com? There we go. Go over here, hit powerbi.com. Once we zip into powerbi.com, we go to the workspaces. We'll go into Power BI Embedded. So this is where we will deploy the report. And from here, we will be able to connect to it. So that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to go Power BI Embedded. I'm going to hit select. Yep, publish the report. Once this publishes, there we go, success. Now the model is inside the service. So now I can officially close the data model. So before I do anything super crazy here, I'm actually going to close the thin report first so it doesn't crash. Go home. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to close the thin report. Next, I'll go back over to the Power BI model. Now, this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this model to trigger a connection string here. So what I'll do now is I'm going to leave this open because I want to use this external tool. So I'm going to click on external tools. I'm going to click the hot swap connections item on my external tools ribbon. And then here we're going to say, I'm going to just do remove so we can see the steps here. There's some other things we can do here, but I'm just going to remove the connection. So I'm going to overwrite the connection. I'm going to keep the same file, overwrite it, but just rip out the connection. That's what the first button does. The second button takes your existing file, copies the file, and then rips out the connection. So I'm just going to overwrite it. So I'm going to overwrite and the existing connection. We're going to go here to the full file report. Do that. I'm going to hit open. And what it will do is it'll strip the connection and it will try to reopen Power BI Desktop with that thin report file. Now that I'm officially done with the data model, I can close this out. So I'm going to close out the data model so you know that it's not running, that I only have one Power BI file machine, Power BI application running. And then now the file's broken again. So I've now just stripped out the data connection. You can see there's no data fields here because I deleted it out of this report. Now I have to reconnect it. So now what I can do is I can then get data, Power BI data sets, and now I will connect to the live connection, not from my local machine, but now from the service. And we will go into the full file model, which is what I just published. I'll create that connection. And this report will now become live again because now I've got all the connections. So even my existing total revenue connection, even though I had defined it in my thin report previously, deleting the connection string is all that I was doing. So this total revenue just stayed there, even though I deleted the connection string out using that tool. So that's it. Now I've got a live connected report to the service. And then if I want to rebuild and get the model running on my local machine again and develop locally, I can download the model. I open the model up. I download the report. I strip out the connection using hot swap connections. That means it deletes the connection string out of the thin report. And then I can reconnect my thin report back to the data model. And now I'm working again locally on my local machine. So that's kind of the gist of the thin reports and data modeling. Full end-to-end demo, working through PowerBI.com, doing local development, doing other development. So with that, I'm going to take a quick pause. And I don't know where Tommy went. I don't see a Tommy video.
You don't see a Tommy video?
Yeah, Tommy, did your computer just die on you? So
No, it looks like I'm here.
Maybe
Oh,
Michael's having technical difficulties.
maybe I'm having technical. I can't see it on the.
There was a good call out in chat. No direct questions that I saw, Mike, but
Okay.
There was a good call out with measure naming.
Oh, yes. What were the like a question about it, or just
Well-
how do you do it? Like what would be your pattern?
I would say what are your practices and when you implement measures? Because one of the gotchas there is if you accidentally create the same measure name, right?
It all
across
goes to
that
crap.
thin report, it'll all blow up.
It will all blow up. So if I made a measure in this local report called sum of product, in the thin report, the power, it literally locks up and you die. Like you just destroy the whole thing. I'm not even kidding you. So I think they are allowing for that, but there's something wrong in the UI that doesn't allow you to click the OK button and let it fail gracefully. It fails hard fail, and you can't click the OK button to do it. So I'm not going to destroy my Power BI desktop, but that is a very bad convention. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about that, I mean, in lieu of that problem, it might make sense to put like an underscore on all your names that are coming out of the data model, or maybe it makes sense to have like some other designation in the naming convention that allows you to know that these measures are coming from the model as well. I mean, measure names can be changed at any point in time. I guess maybe my preference would be if I'm going to make more calculations, maybe I would name all my calculations in the model with a clean name because they're going to be seen everywhere. And then in the report, I might add an underscore to the front of the name. So that way every report calculation is unique. And by the way, they'll also bubble to the top. So if I go to this report, if I rename total measure here, let's just go to total revenue. Total revenue.
Dan
and then
recommends underscore local measure name.
Geez, wow, going really all into it.
Yeah.
So if I do it
full text.
Full text. So if I do underscore total revenue like this one, this will automatically bubble all my measures to the top of the list, which is awesome. I do like that. And then you also have delineation between the things that are in the model.
Your screen.
Yeah, let's try doing that. That's a great point. Let's do that again. All right, here we go again. So I made an underscore on the total measure or total revenue here, and then that bubbled that right to the very top of the list. So it's now on the top of my list. And then now you can see that the model measures are things that do not have an underscore. And then the thin report is the one that does have an underscore. So again, more clear delineation there. And you can always rename these in any visual. So if I go to the total revenue visual and want to rename it, I can say Seth's monthly income, 26 million. Or, yeah, that's it. Any other questions or any other comments?
Yeah.
I wish, man. I'd be doing this podcast every day. Just be like hanging out.
I would be remiss though to ask. First, there's been a lot of comments and questions around measures, like where do the measures live? Where can I edit a measure? And I think that's part of not the ambiguity of this, but something to really keep in mind. That I think as you're doing this, Seth, and you always say this, is never think you're just doing it for yourself. So I would probably say, like, what would be my first question is what would be something, what process could you do that you are building this, let's say, with the intention of someone else who's going to be using the thin report, in terms of how do you create a process where you don't break it?
Yeah. So, I would definitely, so some things that I would say best practices that work well for not breaking things, definitely using the underscore, something like that on the measure level. It helps you not break things. Definitely want to have folders for all your global measures. I think that's very appropriate. I think that's one of the best practice that I'd like to lean on or lean into, because then you know very clearly where those measures are coming from and what they're doing. I don't like making measure tables right now. I used to be a big fan of it, but now that it's easier to make folders of measures, I actually prefer putting folders of measures where they belong in the tables that make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So typically your measures are coming out of the fact table. So there should be a single table that is your fact table or multiple fact tables. And in there, you're going to put most of your calculation things that
Right.
you're going to need. And most of the dimension tables are just selecting columns, or they're how you're going to slice and dice that data in other fashions. So
Right.
typically the dimension tables don't get measures, and you'll have one or two tables that have measures per, this is the fact for my transactions table. This is the fact for my sales table, those kind of things. Tommy, Seth, you got any best practices?
Alex has a question. How do you handle RLS testing in this process?
You don't. You just don't test anything in RLS.
Yeah.
You don't use it. RLS is a bad feature. So RLS
Ooh.
testing, I think Alex is going to be causing me some pain and grief. So RLS on the thin report does not give you the ability to look at it. So
Right.
you can't test it.
I think where he was going was on the model.
Yeah, so on here you can't test RLS on the thin report.
Right.
So, but what we can do is we can get out of this, and you have to go over to the report and look at
Right.
that. Or I think you can go into the PowerBI.com service and
Well,
look at it.
RLS is tied to the data model. So if you're creating you're creating row level security, you have to do it in desktop first in the local original model.
You set it
You
up.
can't do anything in it. Yeah.
Yeah, you set it up locally. But if I go into the service, hold on, let me just check here. If I go into PowerBI.com and I go into probably the wrong PowerBI.com. Let's go to the right one. Let's go to the PowerBI.com for this guy. Power BI. And then this is, so I don't know, did I publish my thin report? I don't think I published it yet. Let's publish this thin report. So let me go to file here. Oops, actually, sorry. Home, and then go publish. So I will publish my thin report. Yeah, let's save it. Fine, whatever. And then I'm going to publish my thin report to my Power BI embedded workspace. It should be super fast because the file is ridiculously small and light. And then we click the open the file. So that takes me over to PowerBI.com where I can actually see the file. And I believe here, is there some setting? I thought there was a setting in here that would allow me to then, on that thin report, check it. Full file report. I might not have row level security set up on it, and I might not have the option for that.
I know, Alex. I teed it up the way you wanted me to, though. So Alex describes was a leading question. To test in the service, you can only look at visuals in the model's PBIX, so you need to create visuals with the right dimensions for RLS testing in the model file, which would make sense in general when you're using RLS and connecting to it in and where you're using Azure Active Directory. It doesn't do us any good for any of our implementations because we don't use Azure Active Directory. We have these models that are surfaced up for external front-facing applications, and you couldn't test it anyway. So you have to test it in the application itself because the users are being passed in via different methods.
I think, is it this one?
It's under data. You have to go into the data sets and then click on security, or you have to go back to the workspace.
So many clicking options. I have a data model in here that has that, and you can test it. You can actually add it in there as well. Hold on. I know it. I thought you could test it in there that way. Data set. Let's go to the data set.
Ellipses. You got to go to ellipses.
See? Make me drive. Security?
And then security.
There it is. So this in the service is where you'd set up some of the row level security. And I believe you could set up things in here where I still don't think
you can add members, but you can't create the RLS here.
Right here, test as role.
Yeah.
So this is how you would test this. So when you have a thin report that would be in here, you'd have to test as role. And again, you have to set up stuff on that model. The models where the row level security would work. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Everyone's calling out, Michael, click the right button. You're not clicking the right button. Awesome.
Great demo.
Great demo. So this is where you could actually pick up where there are specific things inside here. And I believe if I did the user and then I did Seth at Power BI tips, I know this user lives in this report. And, oh, come on. You should be able to test it with them. And so that, nope. Apparently I did not do it right. Anyways, that's where you should be able to view as with level of security. Some of these things don't work well because I do everything with app registrations. So I do app owns data as opposed to user owns data, and the app owns data there's a different connection method for all of the embedded insecurity there as well. All right,
So
cool.
let me ask one last question. What are some of the limitations or things that a user or an author should look out for in terms of breaking or features that are limited? For example, composite models, where would breaking happen there? Or what are other kind of pitfalls you should look out for?
Ooh, those are good questions.
Specific with thin reports, huh?
So, I mean, the
Yeah.
composite model would not matter because composite models are at the model level. The model is a normal Power BI data model. So the report doesn't change, the thin report, but the data model could have any kind of composite. You could have a
Right.
blah, 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 direct query connection or an import connection. That would be fine.
Mhm.
And you can also do models of models. So if I'm in the thin report and I wanted to add other data to it, there is a little, actually, I'll go back to the share screen here. On the bottom right-hand corner of the report, while I've connected to the data set, make changes to this model. This is using the new feature of direct query to analysis services. So if I wanted to add other data sets or other data tables to this, you can use this. But there are a lot of limitations that go along there, and I would probably point you to the Microsoft documentation article to read through the
Mhm.
limitations of when you make a direct query to a Power BI data set model, because there are like you start stuff starts getting limited, and you start having cross chatter talk between your local data that you're loading here plus the tabular model. So you have to be able to transfer data between the model, and there becomes a lot of complications when you start doing the direct query to analysis services.
More chances to break.
More
Yeah.
chances to break there. I would not
It,
recommend it unless you really have to do like extensive testing to get it done.
the other thing that's kind of related to this topic that I'm vaguely remembering is just be careful when you're using things like ALM toolkit to push measure
Mhm.
changes um,
Yes, I'll show that
to
too.
a model that's deployed. Because if you
Yep.
push any table object, and that includes calculated columns,
Yes.
you'll initiate a full model refresh,
Yes.
which you don't want to do
Don't want to do
on
that.
the big models. So it's really cool to have that. Like, now we're talking kind of XMLA endpoint, right? Connecting out and
Yes.
deploying a measure in line on the model itself. Um, but if you touch some of those other things, you're gonna have a bad day.
So I'm opening up the
Yeah, and
Power
that's a
BI
good point, Seth, because one of the
model. So I'm going to open up the model here real quick. Tell me before we jump in there. And I'm just going to show people what this looks like. If I click the ALM toolkit, this will bring up our ALM toolkit to connected to this model, but I can compare this with something inside the service. So I can go to the data set full model, and I don't want that one. I want so to show you where this lives, I go into powerbeta.com, the service.
So this would be a great way to, like, hey, you have a thin report, right? But you want to add measures, but you don't want to add the measure in the thin report. You could add the measure locally in the model file and then do the diff with ALM toolkit and publish it directly.
Exactly. So I go in here
And then it
to
automatically, it'll, like, the thin report then recognizes it, and then you can use it again.
So I copy out my premium workspace option here and say I'm going to go connect to the workspace here, and then I'm going to get rid of that. Once I connect in here, it'll say connect to your environment. It'll make me sign in, and then with that, it will then let me see my report. So there is my full file model file here, and when I click OK on this, the very first option you should start looking for is under this options area. And if I make changes, you want to do this last option here, and there's probably other people who know this better than I do, but like process only affected tables is relevant and very needed for whatever you're going to be doing. So you can put that on there, and then you can do full diffs of, let's do the compare again, hit OK. Then you can do full diffs and compare between what's happening in the service. And there's nothing changed here. So what I'll do is I'll add a measure here real quick so you can see what this diffs would look like. So let's add in one more new measure. Let's just do a new measure here. And then I'm just going to do equals 1. And then I will also move it into the folder, hopefully. Of course, I had to go to a different window. Will Thompson, can you please fix this? I hate
He's
this.
researching my question.
No,
We
he-
know you're
right now.
watching,
He's a
Will.
little
We know you're
busy.
watching, Will.
We know you're lurking in there.
They,
right?
Microsoft's always
then-
peering around the corner. So, Will,
Yeah.
can you please fix?
And
I
then
want a better experience here,
then
Will.
let me know
Please.
if filter panes were in the service in 2017.
Yes.
Let me know
Tables,
that
Will.
first.
Yeah. No. That no one needs to know about that, Tommy. So what you'll see right away is in here we have now I created my new measure, so it's missing in the target file. So because I'm on Power BI Premium, I can make a measure in my local model. There it is, and then I can even look at doggone it. I can even look at the definition of it. So if I click on it, here's the full definition of what happened when I created that new measure, and then now I can say, oh, I just need to deploy that one measure to my report. I can then validate it, add the new measure, hit OK, and then hit update. Yeah, let's update the target. So what this will do now, looks like I don't have an XMLA turned on, so I should turn that on my capacity. Seth, you've locked me out again. So if I had the XMLA stuff turned on, apparently I could go edit this, but this should push. This would push my change bin to the service if I had my admin settings turned on correctly. So, anyways,
Good stuff, Mike. Good walkthrough of the thing.
Good stuff. One thing I do want to say, just real quick, for anyone who's getting really fancy with using XMLA connections, if you make a change to a live data set in the service, and you also really enjoy downloading Power BIX or Power BI files from the service, you lose that ability on that report. So just really want to note that. So if you make a change in the model
yeah,
on a data set in the service, like using Tabular Editor, you can no longer download that report from the service as a PBIX file. So really just
a lot of
just good
edge
to know.
cases here.
Be like Mike, save all your PBIX versions.
in SharePoint.
Stick them in
'cause
SharePoint.
The service ain't gonna save you. Yep.
Not yet, anyways.
Mike, this was great.
That's it. So with that, I'm gonna hang on this call. We're gonna close out this call here on the YouTube channels or all the social medias. Before we leave, I'm gonna throw down a Teams link here. If I gotta pop into Teams here just briefly. So bear with me one moment here while we get a Teams link rocking and rolling. And then what that'll do is anyone who's on any of the chat windows, I'll hang out here just for a little bit and leave the stream going for a minute or two. But anyone is more than welcome to join the Teams meeting. I hope I can let Seth and Tommy in, so that way we don't have to worry about it. I don't know if you guys are admins to that thing. A little bit. We'll work it out. We'll figure it out. So let me get here into Teams. Let me
Chat
get
among yourself.
Yeah, chat amongst yourselves as we get this thing rocking and rolling. Any other final things, Tommy, Seth, that we need to kind of roll out and wrap up here?
No.
I think this is a phenomenal, Mike. Thank you.
Not bad for like 15 minutes of preparation.
See, you shouldn't say that, Mike, because this was probably one of your best demos I've seen you do in a while, and all the ones you do prep for are like that's
Crap.
the one you're like,
You're like,
oh man, oh hold on,
It's all
I'm
broken.
back."
That's amazing. That's so true, though, actually. All right, so let me see if I can get the Teams meeting rocking and rolling. I gotta get the. How do you edit the?
Seth, you're gonna give him the idea. I'm gonna see him at the next conference. It's like, hey, when are you going on in 10 minutes? What are you working on? Oh, I'm just putting my slides together.
I'll figure it out in a minute.
I'll figure it out.
Full demo. All right, so here is the stump or the here's the happy hour link. So happy hour link. Feel free to join there. So thank you all for very much joining us. We really appreciate your time. Hope you learned a couple good nuggets or some interesting things here to contemplate and go over. Feel free to share the videos, and we'll see you in the happy hour.
Join the link, grab a drink.
I probably should put that in. I'm going to put it in Bitly as well. So I'm going to just quickly go over there too. Drop.
Looking for it in LinkedIn too. Waiting for it in LinkedIn.
Yeah, the link that Teams gives you is incredibly long and probably not very helpful. So let me just create a link here. Enter the long link. Create. Copy the value. Here is the short link. Short link to the
Make
happy
sure to
hour.
put it in our chat too.
And I'll put it in your chat, Tommy, too. That way you guys can see the chat window for that as well. Just in case I missed something. All right, Tommy and Seth, I put it in there. All right. With that, I think it's a wrap. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you in a couple minutes on the happy hour.